Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are all enjoying the Love Cup or Ultra League, whatever you're choosing to play. And today I have some battles with Rotom to share with you guys. I tried it out in the Love Cup and I was surprised with it. I was able to climb to the 3090s, which was really close to leaderboards a couple days ago. And it performed a lot better than expected. Now, I haven't seen a lot of people talk about Rotom. I think there's only like one other YouTuber, it's Axon. He made a video on Rotom. But aside from that, I feel like this Pokemon has really gone under the radar. It's not even ranked on PvPoke, so a lot of my opponents were not expecting it. But also a lot of my opponents didn't know the moveset that it has, so it created a lot of interesting scenarios where either my opponent would shield a move that they didn't need to shield, or they would let a move go that they needed to shield. So it was working really, really well for me. Now, before we get into the battles, I don't want anyone to tell me in my comments that they lost with Rotom. I do not recommend this Pokemon for climbing. But if your goal is not to climb, but to have fun, then this is a nice Pokemon to try. It's pretty spicy. Like I said, there is that element of surprise with it because not a lot of people are aware of it, but it is squishy and it is even going to struggle against the Pokemon that it counters most. So I'll show you guys in this video where I struggled a little bit with Rotom because of how glassy it is. So I don't recommend it for climbing, but if you want to have fun, it is a fun Pokemon. Alright, I'm just gonna jump straight into the battles. The team I ended up building around Rotom is Rotom on the lead, running Thundershock by the way, not Astonish. I know that others were recommending it with Astonish. I prefer Thundershock for the spamminess and for the normal types, which are very common in Love Cup. I was also using Alomomola on the safe swap, and I had Medicham with counter in the back. Medicham and Alomomola should be able to take care of Rotom's hardest counter, which is gonna be that Crocodile. If anyone wants to run this team, just keep in mind it is going to struggle against Pokemon like Druddigon, and it's also going to struggle against fairy types, especially if your opponent has two fairy types in the back. So I've warned you guys, let's jump into the battles. In this match, we were up against Alomomola on the lead, but for some reason, my opponent swapped out and brought Medicham into Rotom, which is not a favorable matchup for Medicham. I was able to land 2 ominous wins on the Medicham before letting my Rotom go. And then I brought in Alomomola and I managed to catch the Dynamic Punch on our own Medicham, which was probably not the play now seeing that they have a Scrafty in the back, because I could have just saved my Medicham for their Scrafty, but I ended up having my Medicham on their Alomomola and my Alomomola on their Scrafty, but it doesn't matter either way because my opponent didn't have any shields left, so I was able to land a Hydro Pump and take them out and take that win. Moving on to the next battle, we're going to be up against a Galarian Slowbro on the lead, which is not a great lead for me or for him. We're both going to be reaching that super effective move at the same time, so he's going to be reaching the Brutal Swing in 5 Poison Jabs, and I'm going to be reaching the Ominous Wind in 5 Thunder Shocks. But of course, that matchup is going to be more favorable for Rotom because Rotom is going to be resisting the Poison Jabs because of his Ghost typing, and it is going to be winning CMP over Galarian Slowbro. So my opponent ends up bringing in Licky Licky. I'm able to take care of the Licky Licky with our Medicham, but then I save Medicham in the back because I'm thinking that my opponent probably baited out the fighting type with their Licky Licky because they probably have something else in the back that's going to be weak to fighters. I end up being correct. It is going to be a Pawniard, and then things start getting a little bit messy here. I swap into Medicham, and here I should have just tapped the Ice Punch as soon as my opponent brought in Slowbro. I end up using my final shield, which is not great. I really needed to get that Ice Punch off to take my opponent's final shield or to get them really low. But now I have a Rotom that has no shields. I am going to be able to reach that Ominous Wind, however, and I'm really hoping that this Brutal Swing is not going to be enough to take us out. It's not. I bank an Ominous Wind. I'm able to Waterfall their Pawniard down, and then I can come in, throw this Ominous Wind on the Galarian Slowbro, take it out, and we somehow manage to win that extremely messy game. This first set is a 4-1, but I wasn't using the same team the entire set. I was actually using the other team that I posted the other day on my channel. So if you want another solid team that I actually do recommend for climbing, you can check that one out. But anyways, moving on to the next battle, we're going to be up against a Licky on the lead. I'm going to go for a Thunderbolt, and then I am going to swap out into Alomomola and catch whatever my opponent throws here. They go for an Earthquake. Of course, if they go for Body Slam, it is going to be resisted on Rotom, but I managed to catch the Earthquake on Alomomola, and then my opponent brings in a Clefable. Okay, at least I'm not seeing the Clefable against my Medicham, but I'm still thinking that my opponent is going to have a third Pokemon that is going to be really good against Medicham because they led that Licky. So I bring in Rotom here, and I should have called the first move. Of course, my opponent was going to go for a Swift, which is resisted, and then they go for a Moonblast. On the second move, I end up using both of my shields, and I think if I had just saved one shield for Rotom, I might have had a very slim chance of winning this game, but we're gonna go for an Ice Punch here, take a shield from my opponent, and then my opponent is going to have a Brave Bird ready to go for a Rotom, and Rotom is not going to survive here. So I'm not sure if I shielded there, if I was going to be able to make it to 2 Ominous Winds to take this Talonflame out, but GG's to our opponent. Anyways, moving on to the next battle, we're going to be up against another Galarian Slowbro, and my opponent swaps out immediately into Wormadam, which Rotom technically walls, but it takes a lot of damage from its moves, so I am going to swap out into Alomomola now to farm this Wormadam down, but we do end up taking a Bug Buzz, which really hurts, and then my opponent is going to bring that Galarian Slowbro back in. Now, getting farmed down could be very dangerous because Galarian Slowbro with energy is going to be really bad for my Rotom. Either way, my Rotom is almost dead because it took so much damage from that Wormadam. I'm able to take a shield from my opponent with a Hydro Pump, and then I can swap immediately into my Rotom. And here, I go ahead and shield, but I should have called that my opponent was going to try to catch the Ominous Wind on Licky. Either way, I think they take us out with the next rollout, so I'm not sure if I would have made it to that Thunderbolt. But anyways, it looks like we're going to be fine because I still have a full health Medicham left for their Licky, and I even managed to call the Shadow Ball on the first move and shield that. So I'm going to go ahead and take the Licky out, and I should be able to handle this Galarian Slowbro with an Ice Punch, but I just have to watch out for a catch, which I do here. I pause, and then the game pauses, and I freak out, but thank goodness we're able to land the Ice Punch on the Galarian Slowbro, and we take that win. This next battle is just really RPS against us. There's absolutely nothing I can do here. My opponent leads Crocodile, and I bring in Alomomola. They have a Charm Clefable in the back, so I'm just going to let the Swifts go on my Alomomola, and of course I am expecting my opponent to shield whatever I'm going to throw. I was really hoping that I could reach another Psychic. Oh, I do reach another Psychic. Okay, so it looks like we're going to take both of our opponent's shields here, but Rotom doesn't have access to any moves that are at least going to hit for neutral damage against the Crocodile, so all this energy I'm going to get here isn't going to be that useful. And I swap out into Medicham. My opponent's final Pokemon is a Skeleturge, so I was super hard countered. Not much I could do here, and I don't know why I'm staying in. I should just go ahead and top left. I guess I'm just hoping that Rotom can do something. I need to throw an Ominous Wind on the Skeleturge to take it out. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and top left. There was no way I was gonna win that. I kept this next match in to show you guys another Pokemon that I really struggled against with Rotom, and that is Druddigon. It is absolutely going to be resisting the Thunder Shocks, but at least we managed to take a shield from my opponent because they're probably not aware of the moveset on Rotom. So we're able to take a shield with the Ominous Wind, and then I swap into Medicham. My opponent brings out a Galarian Slowbro. They are going to be able to take us out with the Galarian Slowbro. And let's see how this goes. They go for a Sludge Bomb. Really unfortunate for me. I am going to have to bring in Rotom here now and shield it. And hopefully I could get to that Ominous Wind on Galarian Slowbro, but they end up catching it on Druddigon, which is kind of good for me because I really need to weaken this Pokemon. I haven't done any damage to it yet. And now I am going to bring in Alomomola, and unfortunately for me, I'm going to take a lot of damage from the Druddigon, and my opponent's final Pokemon is an Alomomola of their own. Both of my last two Pokemon are basically dead. I am not going to be able to handle their Alomomola, so I'm going to go ahead and top left. So unfortunately, that was a negative set, but the next set is going to be positive, and it is going to help us climb a lot of points. Moving on to the next match, we're going to be up against a Talonflame on the lead, and my opponent swaps into Scrafty. I'm going to take my sweet time with Rotom, knowing that those counters are doing nothing, and charging up a bunch of energy before I swap out into Medicham. I know that Medicham is easily going to be able to handle the Scrafty. I'm going to be able to counter it down here, leave with a ton of energy, but I'm just going to be able to throw one Ice Punch on this Talonflame before they take us out with an Incinerate. Now I can come in with my fully loaded Rotom, and I just want to make a note there. That was throwing at good timing. I did 2 Thunder Shocks, but unfortunately I lagged 1 turn, and that's why my opponent was able to sneak in and Incinerate. Either way, it doesn't matter because they let the Thunderbolt go. We take their Talonflame out, and my opponent's final Pokemon is a Medicham, so that was GG's for my opponent. Okay, so this next game should have been a really easy win for me. My opponent leads Wormadam, which, like I said, we technically wall, right? Well, they go for a Bug Buzz here, and it does so much damage, and then I go for an Omnis Wind here, thinking that it's enough to take this Wormadam out, but it's not. I should have just gone for the Thunderbolt, and then I would have had alignment on my opponent's backline because my opponent has a Soul Rock in the back and an Electrode. They are going to end up having alignment in their favor. Their Electrode is going to be on our Alomomola, and their Soul Rock is going to be on our Medicham. So if I had just gone for that Thunderbolt and one lead, I could have won this game. Anyways, my opponent is going to take our Medicham out here. This actually ends up being a lot closer than I expected. I'm going to let the first discharge go on our Alomomola, and maybe I should have shielded it. Actually, my opponent would have made it to another one, but it gets really close, but they take us out before we can take them out with the waterfalls. Moving on to the next battle, we're going to be up against another Clefable, and I hate getting baited by this Pokemon. I go for the Thunderbolt immediately, and my opponent lets it go. So now do I call the Swift? I actually called it. I was able to let it go on my Rotom, and then my opponent brings in a Licky Licky. Okay, I farmed up just a little bit of extra energy before swapping into Medicham, and I managed to call the Shadow Ball from their Licky Licky. We're going to be able to take their Licky Licky out, and I'm thinking that my opponent might have something else in the back that's going to be weak to fighters. So I go ahead and use my final shield. It looks like we're correct. It ends up being a Magcargo, but I don't even need that Medicham because I have a Alomomola, and my opponent is going to go ahead and top left. Now in the next match, my opponent leads Scrafty, but they end up swapping out immediately into a Alomomola. I decide to stay in. I'm going to go for these Thunderbolts. We take a shield from my opponent on the first move, and this Alomomola is still way too healthy, so I'm going to go for another one. And we take both of our opponent's shields. Okay, I'm able to reach an Omnis Wind. At least this is going to weaken their Alomomola, and now I can come in with my own Alomomola and start building up energy. My opponent swaps out into Scrafty, which is really good for me. I am expecting my opponent to have another answer to Medicham in the back because they led something that is really weak to fighters. So them swapping and switch locking Scrafty into my Medicham might be good for me. However, my opponent brings back in their Alomomola here. I'm going to go for a Dynamic Punch to take it out. I think I could have gone for an Ice Punch, but it turns out that my opponent's final Pokemon is a Miltank, so they are ABA weak to Medicham. Anyways, GG's to our opponent. We are going to take that win. Moving on to the next battle, we're up against a Skeleturge on the lead, which is okay for Rotom. At least I can go for those Omnis Winds to hit for super effective. But my opponent doesn't stay in. They swap out into Miltank, and of course I am going to bring in Medicham for the Miltank. But now I'm thinking that maybe this was a bait because my opponent might have something else that's going to be weak to fighters in the back. Okay, so here I decide to just bring in Rotom immediately. Whatever their third Pokemon is, it's not going to matter because I still have Alomomola to take care of the Skeledirge. And it turns out that my opponent's final Pokemon is a Tyrantrum, and they let the second Ominous Wind go on Tyrantrum. I'm able to get them into the red, and I have an Ice Punch saved on my Medicham, so I bring it in here, go for it immediately. They let it go, and then as soon as my opponent sees the Alomomola, they go ahead and they top left, and that is going to be a 4-1 with Rotom, close to leaderboard elo. I just have a couple more battles to share with you guys before I end the video, but actually my favorite battle is not this one, but the next battle after this. It is probably the best battle in this video. But in this match, my opponent led Alomomola, they swapped into Scrafty, and because I farmed up so much energy after they swapped into Scrafty, they go ahead and they top left. But this next match, we are up against a Licky on the lead, and my opponent has a Fairy type in the back, by the way. I am going to be able to go for a Thunderbolt here. I think my opponent was able to sneak a rollout because I lagged and that affected my counting. But I am able to catch the Earthquake on Alomomola, and we draw that Clefable out. Okay, they go for a Moonblast here. I am going to be able to go for a Psychic. Let's see what my opponent decides to do. They shield it. Okay, not good for me. They're even able to come out of that matchup with so much energy on Clefable. I'm going to call a Swift here. They almost always bait on the first move, and I'm going to shield the next one. Okay, it ends up being the Moonblast. My opponent brings that Licky back in. They go for a Body Slam here. I end up catching it on Medicham, but I am going to be able to counter this Licky down. Unfortunately, we have to take another Body Slam, but it's fine. It looks like my opponent's final Pokemon is going to be a Talonflame. Okay, I can go for Ice Punch against the Talonflame to weaken it. I make it to another Ice Punch. Hopefully I can take their final shield, or not. Actually, they let it go. They are in farm down range for our Rotom. We're going to be able to take their final shield here. And it looks like Rotom wins CMP over Talonflame. And Rotom is even going to be able to reach a third Ominous Wind for the Clefable to take the Clefable out. And what a match that was. Rotom absolutely shined, and that was all I needed. One solid game to showcase this Pokemon in all its glory, and I feel like that's a good place to end the video off. Now, I've just included this one final battle because it ends up being super close, and my opponent has 2 Fairy types on their team, which is really difficult for me to handle. But I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys like my content, please consider subscribing. Maybe leave a like. It helps me out so much. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye-bye.